If you are over 55 and trying to retire on Bitcoin, you're solving a very different problem than someone who is 35. Most Bitcoin advice assumes you have decades, multiple market cycles, and endless time. But if you are 55, 60, or 65, retirement isn't some distant idea. It's becoming real. You may already be thinking about when you will stop working, how you will replace your income, whether your savings are enough, and where Bitcoin fits into all of that. The problem is that most Bitcoin content skips straight to price predictions. Bitcoin at 500K, 1 million, or 5 million. But I think that's backwards. Because before you can decide what Bitcoin needs to do, you first need to understand what retirement needs to do. So in this video, I want to walk through the exact process I would use if I was over 55 and trying to figure out whether Bitcoin could help me retire or not. Step one is the mistake that many people obviously make, and they start with Bitcoin. I think you should start with your life because retirement isn't funded by Bitcoin, retirement is funded by income. So let's use a simple example. Imagine you want the equivalent of $80,000 per year in retirement. Not because 80,000 is right, just because the maths is easy to do in dollars. That's your target, let's say. Everything else comes after that because someone who wants to spend $80,000 per year is solving a very different problem than someone who wants 150K. The first step is simply answering what does my future life cost. The second step is this is where many people discover that they are closer than they think. Let's continue using our $80,000 example. Now imagine that you already have social security worth 30,000, pension worth 10,000, and retirement accounts which are generating 15,000. That's about 55,000 already covered, which means you aren't solving a $80,000 problem. You're solving a $25,000 problem, and that's your retirement gap. And I think this is one of the most important numbers in retirement planning because Bitcoin doesn't need to replace your entire retirement income. It only needs to replace the gap. So this brings us to our third important step. Now we can finally talk about Bitcoin because Bitcoin can play many different roles here. For some people, Bitcoin can be a retirement plan. For others, Bitcoin is an accelerator. And for others, Bitcoin is simply an insurance. Let's look at each. If Bitcoin is the retirement plan, your future depends heavily on Bitcoin's future purchasing power. That's the highest risk approach. If Bitcoin is the accelerator, retirement was already possible. Bitcoin simply helps you get there sooner. Maybe retirement moves from the age of 67 to age of 62, and maybe work becomes optional earlier. And that is where I think many people over 55 actually sit. Then there is Bitcoin as an insurance. In this case, Bitcoin isn't expected to retire you. It's simply there to help you protect your purchasing power if the traditional assets are struggling. So the same asset, but is playing a different role. And understanding that role matters more than understanding any particular price target. The fourth step is let's go back to our $25,000 example where the retirement gap we have figured out. Now we need to ask how much capital would be required to generate that income. Using a traditional 4% withdrawal framework, you will approximately need $625,000. That's the number that matters, not Bitcoin, but the capital. Because retirement doesn't care where the money comes from, whether it is Bitcoin, stocks, real estate, or something else. Retirement only cares whether the income exists or not. Now we have a target of $625,000. Now let's assume and stress test the Bitcoin prices that it might reach so that I can figure out a Bitcoin number for myself and arrive at a conclusion whether Bitcoin will help me or not and how much Bitcoin I will need for that help. Let's finally connect the Bitcoin to the plan. Let's imagine three different outcomes. Scenario one, Bitcoin reaches $250,000. So to reach my goal of $625,000, I will roughly need 2.5 Bitcoin. In scenario two, if Bitcoin reaches $500,000, I will need roughly 1.25 Bitcoin. And in scenario three, if Bitcoin reaches 1 million, now you will roughly need 0.625 Bitcoin. Notice what changed. Your retirement didn't change, only the Bitcoin assumption changed. And that's where I think most people start with the wrong question. They ask how much Bitcoin do I need, and instead of asking what role does the Bitcoin play in my retirement. So the sixth step is now we arrive at the real question, not can Bitcoin retire me, but am I actually on track? Let's imagine three people. Person one already has 80% of the retirement covered. Bitcoin only needs to cover the final 20%. For them, retirement may be very close. Person two has about 50% covered. Bitcoin could meaningfully accelerate the timeline. Person three has only 20% covered. Bitcoin can still help, but retirement may require more than Bitcoin alone. And that's why retirement planning always starts with where you are today. One thing I have become increasingly convinced is that most people don't actually want retirement, at least not in the traditional sense. What they want is options, flexibility, control over their time, the ability to work because they want to, not because they have to. And that's why I think about retirement differently. Retirement is a date, freedom is a condition. And Bitcoin can potentially help create that condition. Whether it's your primary retirement asset or one piece of a larger plan, the people who make the most progress aren't usually the people with the boldest predictions. They are the people with the clearest plans. Of course, the example I gave you here is a simplistic breakdown of how it works on a superficial level. And I know life situations of everyone's are more nuanced than this example. So if you have Bitcoin and have been trying to figure out where Bitcoin fits in your retirement and whether you are on track, I have put together something interesting in the description below to go exactly deeper into those questions. So you will find it linked below. And until then, I will see you in the next video.